Welcome to UberCube, the podcast we discuss all things cube, but with refreshments. This is your host, Anthony Adams, aka UberBear, and today I'm joined by my other two amazing hosts, starting with the one that's always the most amazing host.
Hi, it's me, May, also known as Magic.
And hi, it's Stu. How you doing today?
And today we are joined by another host, a very special guest that will get host status because this cube, it's a cube that I look at for ideas, and I don't tell him that enough. But I'm wondering what he has. But before I even introduce this gentleman here, I'm going to go ahead and ask. Could you just tell us who is here and why?
Hey guys, Scott Mirts here. Great to be on UberCube. Great to have a little refreshment with the gang.
So what we're going to talk about today, again, it's my arch nemesis cube. It's the cube that I'm always like, I've got UberBear's artifact cube, and I'm always staring at the Curio Cube because this Curio Cube is dope. And I'm like, I'm not going to tell him. Like, I am literally cherry picking ideas. I'm like, all right, he added that card. That must be a really good card.
I was going to say, you can't let the cat out of the bag.
I did. It's too late now.
Now Scott's on the show.
I'm like, what's he going to add? All right, cool.
And you're saying how amazing this cube is.
It's
so
sick.
I think the deception has been blown. But yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about, the Curio Cube.
Con 2024 featured. Let's go ahead and...
Yeah, very exciting. Congratulations.
You guys have got to play this cube.
Is this the first... Is it old enough to have been featured at CubeCon 2022 or 23?
23, yeah.
23, okay.
It was kind of in the last running. We were going... Me and UberBear over here were going ahead.
Yeah, it was a little gross. It was like, to put it in perspective, it was a +1 vote, -1 vote, +1 vote, -1 vote type of contest. It was gross. Like, I think we had, you and I, this is part of it too. Like, I know how good your cube is. And we are down to the last, 5 minutes of that running. And you're looking at because I had this oh shit thing come up too. I'm like, oh man, damn, oh. I'm like 9% behind. I'm like, oh crap.
Get the squad.
Squad.
Let's go.
Yeah, no, I was posting in the work Slack like, all right, y'all, I need a quick vote.
Everybody's squadding up.
It was down to the wire.
People were sweating on their brows, dude. It was like,
I kind of am again.
Yeah, it was like 3 vote differential. So besides the fact that your cube is dope as AF, in addition to that, I remember that race. And that race really stood out for me. And I felt like, and it was even some silent conversations I know may have occurred, we both won that race. Like, you legit should have been there. Because we both won. Nobody does that. Like you would have called another vote at 3 votes, right? I mean, that's how I would have done it. I'm like, Judge?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some famous recounts, I think, for that margin of difference.
Yeah.
I think the reality is we're both winners, right? We have some really similar but really unique cubes individually, you and I. So it was just fun to kind of go toe to toe. I think everybody won,
I do too.
It was a good time. And I'm excited for, another crack at it.
That's very sporting.
Everyone's having fun, then everybody's the winner.
Yeah, that's very sporting, Scott. I wouldn't be as gracious as you're being right now. I'd be like, screw you and your
just out here for the
stupid cube. Listen.
Yes.
I'm here choosing
Scott,
violence.
you're missing a bless your
like
heart opportunity
train
right now,
machine.
big time.
All right, let's do what we always do over here. Let's start with our drinks of the episode. Scott, tell us what you got today.
Okay, I'm going a little non-alcoholic today. We got ruby hibiscus, sparkling water with a Fuji apple situation. So
That sounds delicious.
Yeah, I want that more.
Trying to hydrate and get prepped for the rest of the day, where the other refreshments will enter the battlefield.
We'll get you one halfway. Yeah. May, what you got?
yeah.
So I am also going to be avoiding the alcohol this time because a couple days ago, my friend had a birthday party and went a little too hard. I don't remember most of that day.
Happy birthday.
So
to
I'm
that
just
friend.
sipping some English tea with some cream and sugar.
Just do it. I have to double down now. So that's what's happening here because I'm going to have a high pitch Mosaic IPA from Highwire. This is
tasty.
it is a sexy IPA. What you got?
I got the same.
Oh, there we go.
I've literally got the
Twinsies.
beer that you gave
Here's
to
how we
me a few minutes ago. So let's crack them.
Let's crack 'em. All right, let's get to the episode.
All right, so let's start out with the absolute top level, 40,000 feet view of this cube. Tell us about tell us how it started, what the design concepts were, and then how you started moving towards the initial part of the design process.
Yeah, it's. I think of all my cubes, this is the one that's had the most flux and the longest, most abnormal journey. Right? The real origin for it was I was obsessed with Neon Dynasty when that limited set came out, right? And Anthony, I don't remember when you started the Artifact Cube, but I just knew in that moment with that set, it was a chance for me to have this baseline and like a Wizards endorsed expression of two different cubes that I wanted individually. I wanted an entirely Enchantress themed cube, an entirely Artifact cube, and I was like, you know what? Why be so extreme, or why think in such like totality? Bring them together.
You know,
And that was exactly.
Yeah, you gotta. The Kamigawa Neon Dynasty was like a metal meets magic kind of thing. That's what I liked about it.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, and it just, I was really like a disenchant is Doomblade in that set, right? Because so many creatures are enchantments, so many creatures are artifacts, and I thought I was really just like, all right, this is what I want to try to recreate and emulate, right? So I had a really quick initial swipe at that, and I started building it in paper because I felt really clear on where I wanted to go with that, right? Because when I think back to, I used to play Vintage a long time ago at the Mana Drain, which is like, it's a forum that's like it used to be called Type 1 back then. I was a big Storm player, but that was like when Mirrodin was coming out in Standard, and that was around the time I took my hiatus. But then when I came back into Magic around 2019, Mirrodin, Scars of Mirrodin, New Phyrexia, Theros Beyond Death. I'm Greek, right? So learning that there's a Greek god-themed plane of existence, I was like, cool. And then I found out it was Enchantress themed, which is like a pet deck from when I was playing budget Vintage, and I was like, oh, okay, perfect. A whole entire world that I can identify with. So this started as Neon Dynasty, but then I started fusing in these elements of my favorite planes, of Mirrodin, of like old Kamigawa, of Theros, and I started jamming these together, and it was really archetypally driven, right? It was so focused on like color pairs, and it was a little on rails, I think, in the first time. And there was a really hilarious experience where I went down to Baltimore with the Lucky Paper crew, and I was doing my first test draft of it ever, right? And you could tell that it was not tested yet because it was nicknamed the Stone Rain Cube, because every card destroyed a land somehow. Exile target artifact.
I like it already.
That sounds like... So you and I have commonality. This is a shout out to Andy Mangold, because if Andy said you were Stone Raining disenchanting, I was oafing and disenchanting, so we are brethren here in this idea, right? Let's go ahead and fist up for that right now. We're just blowing up everything. Just literally death row for artifacts and enchantments.
Yeah, and I was mortified that I was had so much opportunities as a designer, right, to like slow down and catch those opportunities. But no one was being mean, to be clear. It was really playful. We had a fun night. Everyone was cackling. We got through the draft, and I had a lot of clear feedback. Zach Barish and I kind of like got coffee a couple times here in the city and talked through it. And he was always asking me like, what cards do you really want to shine? And I knew Tezzeret the Seeker, Goblin Welder, right? These sort of cards that like I love in my soul. I want Selesnya enchantments to work, but I want it to be fun. And that came to sort of like the second iteration, which was less Neon Dynasty and more just let's dig into more slightly ratcheted up, more powerful versions of these cards, right? So that was when I was looking less about drafting on rails and a little bit more of just sort of like, what does blue-white do? How can I use artifacts for that? What does green-white do? How can I use enchantments for that? And it was a little bit more based on color identity, but still, I was still speaking about it in like a synergistic way. And then I had a really unique experience at CubeCon 23 where I just had the worst draft of my entire weekend, right? I just like, the draft went off the rails, the games went off the rails, and I just didn't enjoy myself. And I was like, I'm dropping from the rest of the event, right?
So this is, let's be clear, this is not a draft of your cube. This is a event draft that you'd done in CubeCon that just went all wrong. And now you're like, now I've got a decision to make.
We know this feeling.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, I think everybody has that experience like once or twice at CubeCon. And that's normal, right? Expectations and reality, pairing software that does not always, like, it's impossible for everyone to get everything they want. These are just like the realities of a large scale event. But it was like acutely miserable to a point where I was just like, I'm done. I'm gonna go hang out with Parker. I'm gonna, get a snack, get a beer, hang out. And I realized, and to be clear, this is like none of the cubes that we've spoken about so far, and I will not name the cube in particular for the sake of being polite, but it was told to be a synergy cube, but I followed synergies and got punished for that. And I lost to 3 color good stuff, 4 color good stuff. And simultaneously, another person who was on the trip with me had the exact same experience, the exact same round. They got put into like their lowest rank or something.
It sounds like Uberbear's artifact cube you're describing.
I want to be really clear. It wasn't. It was neither of the cubes involved in what I'm talking about. Uberbear's artifact.
Can I just say this very quickly? But this highlights something that I'm convinced about. Right, good stuff always wins.
Yeah,
good stuff always wins.
Yeah, and I think there was a click for me in that moment, right, where I'd spent months and months and months telling myself, Curio Cube is a synergy cube. Synergy is what gets you the W. And then it's like, well, actually, you know what? Whoever picks the haymakers and slams them on the table wins, right? So that was when I came back really energized to find a way to make this a cube that does not fall for the sort of like archetypal pitfalls of like an artifact and enchantment cube. So I went back to the drawing board. I was also kind of struggling at the same time with the infect theme, right? Because this is around all B1 coming out, and I was like, okay, infect's coming and it's toxic. So
that's brave, because infect is up there as one of the most polarizing mechanics in Magic, right? Some people really like it. A lot of people really don't like it. So to have like really, really obvious support for that in your cube, that's quite the decision. I'm going to applaud you significantly for that. Well done.
Thank you, Stu. Thank you. I think it's one of those things where I, as an individual, always like things a little to the left. I think everybody gets into Magic in some iteration because it's something a little to the left, and then they can engage in their version of a little to the left. Even if you're playing Is It Murktide, it's still a little to the left of somebody who's, got another hobby or another interest, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the Phyrexian archetype was something that had a lot of phases for me. So I'm jumping around about a couple points, but basically I knew synergy was not actually a real thing that worked how I wanted it to in the Curio Cube.
I want to kind of do a top down for the listeners that aren't familiar with it. When we're referring to I looked at it, you basically have like 4 quadrants to this cube. That's how I looked at it, outside of Planeswalkers, which technically could be a 5th quadrant. But you're looking at artifact synergies, enchantment synergies. We're going to call poison and infect a single synergy because it can work with these. And then what I liked, where you were mentioning the Phyrexians, to me, that was a thematic tie that binds all this together. Even maybe not so much, they're good. I looked at your list, they're good. But they also make it feel like you've created a unique plane now. It's different. It's this whole, when you talked about deriving ideas from Neon Dynasty, and because they had enchantments and they had artifacts and ninjas, I'd say the Phyrexians are kind of your ninjas. You've made a new plane. And I really dig that about what you've done here. I think they're a great tie-in point, opposed to if you had just done artifacts, enchantments, and poison, which you could have done this trifecta, this triumvirate. I think the Phyrexians really play a story role to this. Does that make sense to everybody? Like they're
I agree.
The specialty on the plane that you've made.
Yeah. I think I needed like someone to play the bad guy, right? Like we've got 2 forces that are like canonically vying against each other in Magic. In this case, artifact lovers and enchantment lovers. And I was like, there needs to be a third sexier thing. And Phyrexians just really slotted in really nicely there. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I knew the tension, right, of an infect deck and a toxic deck being the same deck actually was hurting people who drafted that way. We have an event here that I run every Wednesday. It's just our cube night. It's called Upkeep New York. And a couple friends would just get punished for trying to do the infect toxic stuff, right, and committing to the bit. And I was talking with Dan Schneider of the Devoid Cube, and he gave me the best suggestion at this exact time where I was rethinking the synergy conversation. And he said, why are you doing, these two have natural friction because one goes off of damage and one still deals damage and goes off of poison. So they're both in the same deck, but attacking on like 1.5 to 2 axes, right? He said, why don't you try just Phyrexian Typal, right? Get the whole thing out there.
I still think you can. So, like, I run KCI combo, and when it happens, but it's like a very live the dream type of thing. It's complex, and when you pull it off, and you demonstrate the lines. So it's like hidden in there, but the individual pieces can also play alone too. Like KCI is a card that any player in an artifact cube, or for that matter, any cube would really want. And then something like Oswald Fiddlebender, these type cards that they kind of give people joy. They're just like little embedded synergies, little microcosms, if you will, right? But they're not like you have to build an entire Oswald deck, right? That you're not forced to do that, but you can use it as a utility component. And I think it's okay that you have micro synergy, because May, you got some thoughts about Johnny Ginny players and how they like to really kind of derive from these cubes?
Yeah, so what's cool about these kinds of environments is that the weird interactions that you can find with them are so vast. Like, especially with things like Goblin Welder, I look at that and I'm like, okay, how can I make a cheaty deck with this? What are the things that I can do to do the welder thing and live the dream? And there's, what was that? Trash for Treasure.
Oh, love it.
And
love that.
anytime that I can see that kind of deck going on with an artifact theme available, I'm a happy player. And when it comes to being able to draft those signals, there's a lot of cards that kind of introduce that, hey, here is a tool. Maybe you can find a way to make it work, but even if you don't, they're still fine on their own. And it's one of the things that you really did well in your environment here. I did have an out of left field question for you, though.
She does this.
Because as per usual, we have to have the curveball questions.
I love them. I'm ready.
So this is more of the, I guess, Timmy player perspective, I guess. But when you were switching from that kind of Neon Dynasty focus into kind of that Phyrexian focus, what are the cards that you feel like you missed the most from older renditions?
That's a really good question.
Collector Oath.
Yeah, that's tough. It's like, yeah, what child did I have to kill that I missed the most? I think it's a lot of the cute things, right? It was like there was a really, really nice like vehicles package that I just wanted like Azorius vehicles to be a thing, right? Mm. And it actually was just like, what if it was that, but everyone who drafted that just drafted Shorikai and dumpstered everybody, right? That's like a card that I miss because Shorikai's fun as
I love
hell
Shorikai,
to like cast.
So I understand.
But I actually got asked by someone who's like, I've seen Shorikai in the 3-0 deck list of multiple cubes at the event for like 3 weeks in a row. Any thoughts about that? And I was like, it's cut from both cubes. Yeah, I think that sort of like vehicles thing is really sad. I think there are cards, it's almost easier to say cards that can't make it in the environment than were cut because I miss them. There's some cards that I actually keep in specifically because I can't cut them. I can't cut Naturalize or Disenchant, even though there are literally better versions of them. I don't run Wilt because I want to run my Onslaught Foil Naturalize, right? Or Viridian Zealot is a prime example. I will not cut that card because it just has the best art. It hits the right notes for me, but
the aesthetic of this cube is wonderful, by the way. That was one of the things that I noticed when I was kind of going through it of, wow, this is a very aesthetically pleasing cube.
I want to ask as well, so take yourself back. So now you're looking at those, the overpowered, right, or the power outliers. Where do you lie in that decision-making process between, okay, I need to cut those cards because they're too powerful, they're 3-0ing every draft, and balance that between maybe looking at raising the power level across the rest of the cube in order to be able to support some of those cards that might be in that sort of power outlier category? Yeah,
that's a really great question. And it's a good way to talk about the understanding that this isn't the synergy cube, right? What it actually is it's a macro-archetype driven cube, right? It is aggro, it is control, and it is mid-range. But each deck is leveraging artifacts and enchantments commingled. You can be an Enchantress deck, you can be an Artifacts deck, but you're actually an aggro Artifacts deck or a control Artifacts deck. So I think that is like a really key understanding and learning.
I thought one of the interesting ties that binds, going back to the Kamigawa, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but was it modified that really kind of gave you a way to thread the needle, right? Because
yeah.
So one of the things that I've had that's been paralyzing to me as a cube curator, if you ever look at my list, because I look at your list probably more than you look at my list, because I'm always just kind of like, he's got good ideas. I'm serious. I'm very serious. But
great minds. Listen,
one of the things that I struggle with is, and I've done this, I don't run Planeswalkers. I've chosen not to. I appreciate that you have. I've always just kind of made this identity where I wanted us to be different. I actually look at yours to make sure we're different, to make that make sense. And then secondly...
That's very flattering.
Well, I do. I truly do. And then the other thing that I look at when I'm looking at my cube, I only run, and this is the only cube I do this in, one guild for each one of them. And I have been thinking about expanding. And the struggle that I deal with oftentimes is I can easily fill in additional Boros cards. I can find 2 more of them that are artifact themed, not enchantment. And this is where I'm going to ask you your struggle. Yeah. And then maybe I can find some Gruul cards, but I don't want them to hate on artifacts. That's always a struggle. So looking at your modified creature, which we'll talk about shortly, and then going to each one of the color sets, like Simic has always been problematic, where it doesn't have thematic interactions unless it's hating on it, which I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead. We're going to skip right through this. And I've got some cards and I'm going to make recommendations. And I promise you, we never give you problems without solutions, but I am going to identify a problem. And we're going to talk about a problem that Stu identified for me personally. I believe it was CubeCon 2022. So I'm going to help you out with this one. Trigon Predator. Trigon Predator is a menace to your cube. Less to your cube. I don't know. Actually, I don't know if it's less to your cube. I know that 50% of your cube will get decimated by this.
I was going to say, I've never heard of that card. It must have just been completely erased from my memory because of the trauma that it caused me
to your bad
in
experience.
Multiple games.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that was the card that I was like, oh, cool, look, it's that card. And at the time, your cube was very much in the artifact, anti-artifact
that was my
zone
design.
Of things, right? So a lot of the removal, a lot of the interaction was based on artifacts. So now here I have this non-artifact creature that is extremely difficult to do anything with, and it's just hitting me, and it's destroying my artifacts every turn. And I was like, okay, maybe I can fade this for like a game that I can win or a cup. No.
So I'm going to save you. I'm going to help you out. I'm going to give you some of my trials and tribulations so that you don't have to. Because just imagine yourself on camera, right? And Trigon Predator is cutting people to pieces. I will go ahead and tell you that it's a detriment to 50% of your cube. I love that card. I do. And Simic doesn't have a real good representation. It just becomes this utility component. But I'm jumping probably through 75% of my little outline I made here. And we have more, I promise you, and we have suggestions. But I think that one I wanted to highlight for you while we're on that topic while it's hot. Because you just ask Stu. Look at Stu's face right now. It's like a milk carton.
I see it. It's like Faces of Death.
I will also add that was a card that I was looking at as well. Completely independent. We did not talk about this beforehand.
But it's
like I looked at the list and I was just like, that is certainly a card that exists in this environment.
We're here to help.
Especially if and the reason why those kind of things always come up, right? We've had this similar discussion with other curators. To me, one of the ultimate feel bads that I always seem to find and I've found this in multiple cubes, is when I am trying to hit that higher level of the power band within the cube that maybe, and really the CMC doesn't necessarily matter, but typically it's in the 4+, 5, 6, even 7. And then all of a sudden I've got this repeatable 3-mana effect that just destroys the game plan that I've spent all this time and all these resources trying to generate. Or I've got hey, I've got to put my 7-mana creature onto the battlefield that I really need to win. This happened yesterday to me twice in back-to-back games. And I'm like, all right, I need my 7-mana flyer. It destroys a permanent, right? So it's pretty powerful. And then it got control magic for 4 mana. The person across from me,
we got all Stu's
son of a bitch,
now.
The same person, in fact, that Trigon Predatored me to death in the Artifact Cube all those years ago. And he just control magic my creature. And I'm like, oh, well, that's good. I'm glad that I spent all that time setting up for my big haymaker.
So let's distill this down before we move forward. This is from so I'm 50% of your cube. Let's put it in perspective. Your cube has more quadrants than my cube, so you can duck and hide a little bit more, and you can do the dies to removal argument, and that is a fair assessment. But when it comes to something like Trigon Predator in an environment such as yours, anything that has repeatable context to it is, in my opinion, to save you personal face at a large event, I've already walked that walk. I'm just trying to make sure you don't walk it after me because it beat people to death and they did not have fun. It destroys the fun. It cuts everything. Like, just imagine you do a great hinge, because great hinge is a big reward. Like, I do these things. Like, I go big splash, right? You worked hard, and that does need to die. And that's okay that you kill that with your air quotes, Doomblade, disenchant removal stuff, because you know what, they get punished because you got to have a certain amount of that. But you can only really do it once until you say snapcaster it, right? You have to earn that pleasure. Trigon just keeps cutting.
Well, yeah, and there's no downside.
It strafes the board.
Yeah, so. There's no downside.
Sorry about the Trigon. Repeatable. We didn't mean to go down the Trigon path, but I think all three of us noticed that.
No, it's all good.
It's appropriate.
I saw it. I felt it. I wanted to get in there.
It has flying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A 3-drop with flying that destroys something every turn that demands an answer is pretty rough, especially when you're punishing your players for doing the thing that you established.
Let's just call it what it is.
It can be pretty rough.
Let's call it what it is. It's the worst card that's ever been printed. Okay? I'm just putting it out there.
I'm glad we're all.
We have to fill in that negativity context from last
serious
episode.
as, you know, that and good stuff always wins. Take that from me.
It's just
a little bit facetious with that. Like,
we went off the rails there, but I think it's very contextual. You can go other arguments. Trigon Predators threatens your planeswalkers, right? Trigon Predator dies to, you got a lot of removal forms in your cube. There's 1,000 ways, so people will tell you that. But for the sake of anything that represents that idea of a repeated effect in these type of environments, again, you're not as binary as I am. I'm very anti-artifact versus artifact. That was my original design. I love your cube so much because you have quadrants. So you can duck and hide. But it is a consideration that those two decks you are supporting have a hate bear in there that it's fully loaded.
I agree. And look, as much as I would love to just spend the next 35 minutes hating on Trigon Predator, we're going to move on. So, for all of our listeners, we always post our show notes in our public channel on their Discord. We've got links in there, or we've got a link to the cube, as well as images that show each of the archetypes and the lanes within the cube. So, one of the questions that we like to ask, right? This is normally one that I ask when I'm sitting down to draft a cube, right? So, Scott, I'm drafting your cube for the first time, right? How do I win? What do I draft?
Okay, I'm going to tell you. I'll tell you what I draft. I have within me there are two wolves, right? I'm going Abzan Phyrexians because that's what's going to make me the happiest. And I gotta say, in the later iterations, I've seen an Ixhel Scion of Atraxa out before every match, every game of like one draft. So it is a dream that is attainable. If you're attending CubeCon and listening to this, please do not be scared about a parasitic archetype. We got Phyrexians in there. I think that's just like, if you want to have fun, that's the way to go. If you're trying to really, if you're trying to spike it, I have found the most success either in the Jeskai deck, right? Your Jeskai, non-creature, right? So you're leveraging both the best enchantments, the best artifacts, and it's more a sort of like traditional, like mid-range to control shell. Because again, it's more macro-archetype focused now than so much like I'm an enchantment deck or I'm an artifact deck. You're going to be having both. That's just the truth, right? Yeah,
so you're getting like your third path iconoclasts out, Showdown of the Skulls, get some non-stop repeatable value out of those cards. Yes, exactly. Love that.
Yeah, even what's the Jeskai one? Kaikar.
Wins Fury,
I got trashed by Kaikar in a Jeskai mirror, and their deck just had everything mine wanted. So I think the Jeskai non-lands deck is really potent. And then I think 4-color Atraxa Beanstalk, that deck is utterly cracked. Like the ramp deck is very real. Obviously Atraxa, hell of a card. Really, really helpful when your environment is basically already saying from the jump, you're going to have a planeswalker to get, you're going to have an artifact, you're going to have an enchantment. Those are usually what are not guaranteed with Atraxa. So she's juiced up in this environment as if she needed any help. But she's not a card you can get out unfairly is the other thing, right? So I always loved the Kinnan, back to the Simic like ramp deck.
Mm-hmm. So you've got some, again, I want to go back to, you've actually done something I haven't done. Besides the Planeswalkers, you've actually delved into multicolors. But if players want to draft, and I want to go ahead and throw this out as a disclaimer too. I don't know if you know this, but you've been voluntold at this point. You're going to be on again for a prior to CubeCon primer, because the decks will change, because you've got all the way up until October. So we're going to bring you back on, right? And we've got other curators that each one of us has chosen as well too, that we're going to reach out. So I just want to make sure right now this cube is going to change over the next few months, and we want to go ahead and prep everybody with a lot more focus, because we're going to do the how do you win in the Curio Cube. But what is the land base in here? That's something I've kind of jumped the shark on here a little bit. How are they casting Brea, the Ethereum Shaper, or Kaikar, right? What are you looking at here for mana?
So my main cube, Curio Cube, is like my real like pride and joy, right? But my main cube, that's like my first cube, is like your very traditional like power maxed haymakers, like legacy, like almost constructed format, right? I'm one of the sickos who has 4 fetches and 4 ABU duels, surveil lands, and I also have Blood Moon in my environment. Not in Curio Cube, to be clear.
Good answer.
But yeah, I choose violence, and I think Magic Design's kind of evolved more to like a many colored place, and I think for me, the sweet spot in any of my cubes is a 3-color deck should be able to not only be viable, but a 3-color deck should be the best, because that is how you are getting real fleshed out expressions of what type of player you are. If you're a Mardu player, you should be able to play Mardu, not Rakdos with a white splash. And I feel really strongly about that. So in this environment, I made a couple of changes. It was previously using filter lands, but I pulled those for a different project. But right now, we have some bridges in most of them. There's a couple of man lands swapped out for some bridges. And then we have the slow lands, so the ones that come in untapped on 3. 1 cycle of those in every color pair. But then double shock, double fetch, 1 surveil land in every color pair. No triomes, nothing too unfair. And then some like 1 or 2 5-color lands that are, contextual, like Seed Core for Phyrexians, Mana Confluence, Mirex, and Glimmer Void.
All right, now I've got to ask, because I'm going to ask you the same question that I did when Anthony and I had this discussion many, many moons ago, and I was like, why the hell are you not running these cards? And that is the triomes, because it seems like when you say, I want to reward people for playing these 3-color, and there's obviously a lot of incentive with things like Brea Ethereum Shaper to play 4-color decks. What is the reasoning? Are you just so heavily relying on the 2 of each shock and the fetch in order to be able to support those much more intensive mana bases? What was the decision for not wanting to include the triomes as well?
Yeah, I think what I've seen in my main cube just as a helpful point of reference for me, because I do have all 10 triomes in there, and I have 4 fetch lands, so obviously a bit more extreme, but I know it's egregious. I think triomes allow for a 5-color deck, which I actually do not want in the Curio Cube whatsoever, right? You should never, if you are 5 colors in this environment, I have failed as a designer, and like that's an inevitability, right? But like I don't believe that the Curio Cube should be a place for 5-color good stuff. And that's really why. It's more a tool of restriction than a tool of like shutting people out from playing their 3 colors. And when I look at the list, 2 fetches, 2 shocks, and a 5th type duel with the surveil lands. That's a lot of fixing that you can get through, searching it up.
My question is that when you're trying to keep in mind how to keep 5-color balanced, how does aggro like square up compared to the other archetypes, relatively speaking? Because usually when it comes to keeping 5-color good stuff like in check, it's just because the environment is slow enough to support it, or they're not being punished for doing it, or whatnot. So how does aggro square up?
So that's a really good question. I think aggro is unique in this environment because it's a lot taller and a little bit. It's less velocity and more more resilience. So to Anthony's point about like modified, and Stu, I'm going to walk back. The Gruul modified deck is actually the way to win this cube. It is messed up. It's gross. That is probably the best deck, and I am keeping a very close eye on it because I've been turning. That's a knob I've been turning down a lot because Universes Beyond is a hell of a design tool, but the Gruul deck and really like the Boros deck are going to be your aggro decks, right? And with cards like Glimmerlens and SRAM, these and the density of equipment that turn into creatures, it allows you to kind of cantrip off of them or leverage them together. But aggro is honestly at a little bit of a disadvantage here. I selfishly am much of a mid-range player, so I lean a little bit more in the mid-range zone than the aggro zone.
I want to peel back again. I'm going to keep coming back to it because this is a learning opportunity for me. So I'm taking advantage of this, right? My cube, again, ones and zeros. I'm very binary. That's no matter what I want to do. And mine becomes, the artifact cube specifically, as I'm talking about, becomes strangely unsettled from the introduction of a card. It is my most turbulent, like, I add a card, people notice the card because it breaks an environment faster than any, like, it doesn't even kind of like meld in. I'll use my Power Vintage Cube. We talked about this in a previous episode, and I can just put anything in there and it goes unnoticed. Like, oh, that card's really great. Like Ren and 6 comes out. Just kind of just melds in, right? Becomes normalized. I put in Gut into my artifact cube. I know that's a good card, but it just screams a differential. Like it just comes out and it just beats everybody to death. Like Thopter Foundry or any of these cards, I can't run Sword of the Meek. I can't do these things because it's unsettling. To my root question with your artifact base, and this is a learning opportunity for me, my cube binary, yours quadrant based, we have similarities. Mine's stable when I'm not running fetches, I'm not running shocks. It's come up a lot. I don't feel like in a 2-point cube, when I'm doing this ones and zeros idea, that I can get away with that. I see that you do it, but you're broken off in 4s. How unsettling was it? Did you always have that from the inception of this cube? Did you always have shocks? Always have fetches? Was it always fast?
No, so it was originally it was pain lands, 2 pain lands, 2 bridges, and 2 fast lands.
That makes sense to me. That's what I'm doing. And that's the breakage I'm concerned with. Is should I push? I'm stealing again from you, right? Your brain, you've advanced past me. You've doubled down. And I want to know if I could unsettle my environment. So I'm actually learning from you now. What was your experience of going forward?
I think you should sleeve it up and test it, which is like an obvious answer, but I don't think it's actually that harmful. I think for me, it was a real unlock in that it made the 3-color deck viable. It made Brea castable. It made these things that felt like stretch goals. Like, again, the Phyrexian deck gaining a concept beyond Infect, right? I needed tools to allow a player to actually accomplish these goals. And the mana base was actually the thing that was hurting me the most, because what happened if I draw, the issue that I had with like the slow lands and the pain lands is, one, the pain lands are not guaranteed to help, but I like them because they worked with like Forsaken Monument. That is a great example of a card that I miss a lot in this environment. But I actually felt the colorless deck was not that additive, as like no one's playing mono brown in this cube. So I decided to whittle down my colorless section and be, for my cube, more intentional, right? I was like, these cards need to pivot their utility. It can be the mono brown Azorius deck, right? So I think I leaned actually on the mana base as the unlock that allowed my players to do what they wanted to do. Where, like, if I'm on turn 4 and I need that land and I'm getting a tapped fast land in, that's so punishing. Or even a bridge, right? The bridge is just like, they're not actually that additive. A fun fact about this cube is the original design, I had Mirrodin original artifact lands in the basic land box. Every player was allowed to get 2 of them just in their pool. They just toss them in. And you want to talk about mistakes, that was a terrible mistake. Because, again, it's an island that you can Stone Rain, right? With your 2 mana disenchant. I felt like just by trying to deviate so hard from like the norm mana base, I ended up hurting my players who tried to commit to the themes and the signals that I was feeding them. And it just felt like the best answer was to just, by unleashing the mana base, I actually unleashed people to enjoy themselves much more.
I think unleashed is a pretty good word for it as well, because that, I would even say, with 2 of each fetch and 2 of each shock, right? There's no Abradors in here, but you do have each of the Surveil lands as well, 1 per each of the color pairs. That is a lot of fixing. I would even argue, right? And I haven't played the cube yet.
I'm gonna.
Yet.
It's on my list.
Want to. It's definitely right there. I would argue that 5 colors is not that difficult with the number of fetches and duels and all those combined. Like, realistically, with any number, 5 or 6 just basic lands, is it that difficult? And maybe this is something that you can comment on. Obviously, you will have played the cube a lot by this point. Do you feel like just with the mana base as it is right now, that 5 colors is like a difficult mana base to construct?
I think that's actually why. So, like, great point about the ABU duels, right? Because that's what's in my main cube. Because I'm like, listen, I want you to be casting haymakers. I want you to be double, triple spelling. I want you to go wild, right? You're going to be resolving adjacent's going to get forced, and there's going to be a counter battle, right? You're gonna have brainstorm, lightning bolt, delver. You're playing traditional legacy play patterns, right? In this, the shocks really slow down or actually like counteract the control decks or the greedy decks. Because if you want to be on curve, proactive, you're paying 2 life. You're paying 2 life, and the surveil lands were the perfect solution for this because there is low key a lot of graveyard interaction in this cube. It's not there's no graveyard theme, but there are cards like, where's the little goblin guy? Stalactite Stalker, right? I like that because to the point of like deviating from like traditional on rails like artifact and enchantments, it's like an artifact aristocrats deck, right? Where I'm going to be descending every turn and recurring things. That's why Bloodghast is in here, right? I need a recursive sack outlet, and like Modern Horizons 3 is a boon for this cube because I got a banging Phyrexian. I have some really good sacrifice fodder. Anthony, I know you feel the same way. It's a great set for us, right?
I've got some suggestions. Yeah, for sure. A Marionette Apprentice. I have tested that 4 times in a row. That is the hottest card in Modern Horizons 3. People haven't realized that is chef's kiss. Oh my god, I have played that back to back, and I realize it's artifact intensive, but it says creature, and we talked about that during our little episode we did recently. That card would be sick in this cube, and it does things, right?
And it's going right in. I haven't made the updates yet because I've just been really swamped with some other stuff that
Don't worry, we did it for you.
But
yeah, we got your new list ready. Just
we already got
it. You are so good to me. I don't even need to do this. You're gonna bring it to CubeCon too, right?
For sure. Yeah. So, May, do you have any follow-up questions based on these ideas that we've talked about so far?
Yeah. Do you know what percentage of lands that you have relative to the amount of cards you have in your cube?
A lot. I know I have a lot. It's definitely in the double digits. I have 77 lands out of 471. So let me calculate real quick.
Do some percentages.
I already did. It's 12.6%.
I was going to say it's about
Oh, we can push more. Then we've got another couple of percentages.
I was going to say those are rookie numbers.
Come on, we got to get up to the 14, 15.
Sometimes like 11%. So to say that you're slightly above retail in terms of like land fixing for the amount of lands that you have relative to the amount of cards that you have is definitely a fair estimate. Would there ever be a point where you would consider adding more lands?
Good question.
Triumphs,
yeah.
Triumphs.
9 lands.
Yeah, the
3 of each fetch.
I think that's the thing that here's the real thing that I struggle with the most with this cube is edits. I joke with one of my pals from our cube group, Max, where he's just like, everything can go in the Curio Cube because you can justify most things because especially with modern match design, it's going to create an artifact token. It's going to create a creature token. It's going to modify something. It's just the core brief is so broad, which makes it really hard for me as I worked in fashion for a long time and I'd have to edit collections with designers. And it was the worst part of the job because I was like, well, just keep it all. It's great. And that's why I don't have like a 360. I don't have a single 360 cube. I never will. I just can't do it. I love all these cards too much. So to find even 10 more cuts, even doing, the Modern Horizons 3 cuts is like, I have to kill my darlings. And I struggle with it.
Speaking of Modern Horizons 3, what kind of cards are you excited for to add into your environment?
Okay, I've got a laundry list. Is it okay? I'm going to have to switch over to my top 5. Let me get the notes app out. I have them right here. Modern Horizons 3.
Don't worry, we already got them for you.
Okay. So this is tough because I think there's going to be some things that might surprise you. I think this is curious, but Mandibular Kite is like up there. So it's a 1 mana living weapon for so it'll be a Phyrexian.
Nice.
1/1 with flying. That's it. And then it's 4 mana to re-equip it. But just that evasive 1/1 flyer really helps with this sort of, aggro deck, right? And then it has the equipment synergies and all these other things. So I think that's up there for me. Etched Slith, I'm really excited about. Evolution Witness is like a really good modified creature that has that reference to an iconic cube staple, which is like a derogatory term, but it's really nice.
Because you did that, you did adapt. So for those that don't know, that's like an EWIT that has the adapt format, right? It's really good.
Yeah.
Okay. If you don't have this card already, I'm ordering it today. It's Metastatic Evangel for 1 colorless and 1 plains. You get a creature, Phyrexian Human Cleric.
Oh, yeah.
3/1. This card is sick.
Yeah.
Whenever another
It's amazing.
non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, proliferate. Oh my gosh. I saw you have like this like proliferation, plus you have
Infect.
Planeswalkers,
Infect.
plus you have Infect, and you have Toxic. Gross.
Yeah, no, it is on there. I have them all written out, not visual. So the joys of product fatigue is I can't remember every name, but that is that and the birthing pod on an enchantment.
Oh yeah,
birthing ritual, just
so good. Chef's
those
kiss.
are.
Have you
those
looked
are, I
at
think, my top,
Spring
like,
Heart
5.
Nantuko? Are you familiar with this card? I put it on the list.
Okay, so I'm going to be really honest with you. That card, it was like one of the last ones previewed, and I was like, amazing. A really enticing enchantment creature. And then I read it, and then I read it, and then I read it, and I read it again, and I still don't understand it. And like I do in a literal sense, I finally like have got comfortable with the sort of clunky templating, but the thing with Curio Cube is it already has enough complexity, and this is the kind of board complexity that I don't want like commander grade board states or board stalls, right? And this card, I think, really encourages that play pattern. And I think by choosing like Kinnan and Simic, right, I'm going more for like a non-land ramp theme as opposed to the land sort of ramp theme, right? Because to the point, Anthony, about how we were talking about similar but deviating from one another.
Right.
John Terrell's Cartographia is similar to ours.
That's funny you
that
should
regard
mention
too.
that. I literally, when I look at your cube, like I think that as well too, right? We're right in the center of that idea.
Yeah, I think you and I are on opposite sides, and Cartographia is right in between both of us.
I
I think that John's use of lands is really elegant in that environment, and to the point, I just love to do things a little different, and I know we're similar in that regard, right?
Well, let's
I
tell
just
people
couldn't
what
do
that
it.
card does. Let's get the listeners, because I want their opinion, because I'm going to encourage them to look at your list, and what I'm going to ask for is listener feedback, and I'm going to ask everybody to let us know and Scott know whether or not they think
Please.
they would want. Right? Let's get some user feedback here. Right? So
Can I do this one? Because I like
read this
one.
card.
So this is, again, Springheart Nantuko. This is 1 colorless and a green for an enchantment creature insect monk.
Weird.
Pretty interesting. It's a 1/1. It has bestow for 1 and a green. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1, and then it has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1 and a green if Springheart Nantuko is attached to a creature you control. So if it's just a creature, you don't do that. If you do pay the 1 and a green, you create a token that's a copy of that creature. So now you're creating a token of a copy of the creature that Springheart Nantuko is attached to. If you don't create a token that way, i.e. if you don't pay the 1 and a green, then you create a 1/1 green insect creature token. It's very word soupy.
It's
but
word
what
soupy.
it basically means is if Springheart Nantuko is attached to a creature and you play a land, pay 1 and a green, you get another creature.
The only reason why I flagged this for you in particular, Scott, is the landfall and because you have fetches. I don't get to take advantage of this. And then our good friend Christian has the Bance Enchantment Cube, also runs like 1 fetch. I'm going to go ahead and give a shout out for him too. But your cube, actually, I think this brings it to life. What do you think about this card, May? It's word soup, it's more tokens, but how do you feel about it?
So, I'm actually not a big fan of it in this environment. And keep in mind, I love Bestow as a mechanic, but landfall, sure, it's triggerable. Making copies of things is always nice.
Always.
But it just feels like it does so much. It does so much. But none of it really... I don't feel like it adds to the current card variety that we currently have in the environment, beyond the fact that, hey, it's an enchantment creature.
I'm on the other side of the fence. I think your land base is better than my land base because you got to tap into the 4 quadrants. You touched into all of the fetches, and this hits on theme. I'm a strong proponent for this because I want to be able to do I don't know if I'm going to say cards that probably aren't in here, but like Rex Sages and stuff like that, right? I want to make it into copies of those. I want to be able to just push this card. I think it's very built around. So I don't want the insects. I never want the insects. I want to be encouraged to draft all of these fetches, which are going to be contested, but in your environment, you're running 20 fetches, and that's my signal to push this card to its limits. What do you think about that, Scott?
I see both sides. I think I'm probably still closer with May in the sense that it adds just general card complexity, right? To the point that Stu said, it's word soup.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I talk to someone, I get a little closer to just being like, oh yeah, it just does this, which gives me a little more comfort. But the thing that I think May kind of touched on is it just doesn't end the game. It just kind of elongates this thing, right? And if I'm adding complexity, it better be closing out a game, right? It better be developing my board beyond, like, it's a little too similar to a commander play pattern where I'm going really wide or really tall, but I'm not actually getting to a destination of your life total. Unless I'm trying to think of cards within the environment that this would be really cool with, or doing something like that, like a Scrapwork Mutt, where it becomes this mid-range, just like Swiss Army knife of
or
Scrapwork Mutt, like
Ask
Anthony
Chill
said,
MTG, maybe it becomes a combustible Gear Hulk.
I mean, I do not want to be on the other side of that, but I do want to see that
pretty
happen.
space.
Yeah, but also that goes back. This is the other thing about something like this with we touched on this earlier, the density of just like true removal, right? If I'm bestowing this and boom, you knock my target, I'm going to get time walked in essence, right? So it was a deep consideration and one that I have a friend, Jacob, who I go back and forth with about like edits and updates particularly. And Jacob is like, nope, too complex. And I was like, okay, thank you. I needed to hear that.
I almost feel like you're incentivized with cards like that. So sometimes I'm just going to put it on a creature that I really don't care about. You know, you want a 2-for-1 me, you want to waste your removal spell on something that I really don't think is that strong. But if I get to just create an army of them just by happenstance every time I put a land into play and pay 1 and a green, which isn't really that much of a cost. And what I tend to find with a lot of these kind of these mechanics, right, where you have to pay mana every time for something to happen, right? It's not just casting spells. Mm-hmm. Now there's an ability that's static, that's on a permanent you control, and if you want to get that ability, you have to pay mana. In some ways, you could say that's a great mana sink, and I'm a big fan of mana sinks. May has spoken many times on her podcast. I know that she's a huge fan of mana sinks as well.
Yep.
But that also has to fall within the vibe of the cube as well, I feel. Like, do you want there to be mana sinks? Are you looking for this to be... And this is kind of another polarizing sort of ones and zeros kind of situation where you're going to have decks that are going to tap their lands and play their spells every single turn. Well, that's going to be the goal of a lot of these archetypes. And then you're going to have archetypes that say, no, I'm very happy to play Island Pass or, you know, Azorius Land Pass or whatever the case may be and kind of leave my mana up. And does that kind of fall? Because it's green, right? Typically green wants to just tap its forests every single turn and put creatures into play and start turning them sideways, right? That's not necessarily the case with every cube or even necessarily every archetype within your cube. But this is where I feel that sometimes these can be a bit, you know, do you want them? Do you not? I don't know.
I'm going to lose in your cube because I want an engine, and this is an engine type card for me, right?
I agree.
I want to do stuff like get your Gear Hulks. I want to just kind of make more of that. It closes out, back to the close out the game, but I want ETB effects, so I'm willing to pay that too.
Well, it's interesting
So
that
I'm
you
on the other
mentioned...
side of the fence. I never want insects. I don't want more of the token density. That's problematic.
And, well, you mentioned combustible Gearhulk, right? Like, oh my gosh, it's so terrible because now I've been 2 for 1. Someone has, played a removal spell and got rid of my combustible Gearhulk. You know what, though? If you've got a combustible Gearhulk out, someone's removing that You've either won or someone's removing that regardless, right? That is a card that is going to end the game. It's a big 6/6. It smacks very, very hard. So do I feel that bad that someone's had to force? Maybe I've got other creatures on the battlefield, and now I'm just even forcing you to do something that maybe you don't want to. Maybe I've got another repeatable piece of value on the battlefield.
So I want to transition back to the problem solution orientation that we kind of talked about. A few cards that when I was looking at your list, from my experiences, again, binary versus quadrant, that's where we're at, right? It's different. But one card in particular that I saw on your list, and I like it too, in context, right, is Simulacrum Synthesizer. I think Stu likes it too. Would he like to tell you about this card? Because he likes it a lot.
So this has been added to a couple of cubes that I've been able to draft in my Power recently. Vintage. Well, I mean, it should have been in the Power Vintage the day it was spoiled because it's absolutely bonkers. So for anyone that's been living under a rock for the past, however long, this is a 2 colorless, 1 blue artifact. When it ETB scry 2, whenever another artifact with mana value 3 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you create a construct, right?
Pretty straightforward.
Artifact creature +1/+1 for each artifact. The value of this card, it just gets out of hand at a pace that very, very few other decks, and even in a Power Vintage cube, this card can get out of hand so quickly. You don't have to pay mana when that 3 mana artifact comes into play. It just happens. It's just repeatable value, non-stop, and it just ends games.
And before we challenge you with this, Scott, I just want to let you know, I'm on a binary spectrum. I am disenchant versus, artifact type stuff, right? Other than the people seeking to hide behind it. And Stu just played Magic recently. I had 1 round of this. We only played 1 round, and I wanted to test it. And I assumed that, and maybe it's less volatile because, again, you're broken up into 4, so your payoffs are different than mine. But I'm going to predict that this card is probably too powerful for your environment. I'm going to tell you my binary type stance. It's too powerful. It broke my environment. And I wanted to lean into disenchants equal death to everything, because they have it, but I have curtailed that. This card literally, Stu, just, what did you do? 3, or you did 4, 5, 6. Yeah. It was 4, 5, 6. And it wasn't like it was broken. It only took 1 match, and it just confirmed my beliefs. I wanted to push it. I wanted to test it. I say, play test this with your friends, but I'm thinking this card is too good for your environment. It's too pushed.
I think that's an absolutely valid statement. I have not even got to see it. No one's cast it in a draft yet.
It's good.
We've only drafted Curio once since it got added. I want to see the violence that ensues before I cut it, because Dig Site Engineer is a great example, right? A little bit more fragile because it is a creature and a 3/3, so it can get hit by a burn spell, it can get hit by a bad combat trade, right? But they're, in effect, very similar, except the 2 mana cost, right? But they're, to me, right, it's a 3 mana investment in like that engine, right? I'm gonna get paid off for doing what I'm doing. So it's enticing to me, but I think that's a really valid concern. I do run Dress Down in the environment,
which is fine.
And I might add another type of wrath like that, whether it be pest control, also from the same set, right, or something that kind of helps you sweep up these constructs or these problematic tokens. But I think it's a totally good call out as something to be on the watch list. It's cracked, and I would not mind like the $100 back for.
And it may be may be very different, right? When you look at, again, your artifact cube is that sort of 1 versus 0.
That's where it gets weird.
You've got a lot more 3 mana artifacts, right? That's one of the reasons why I was able to abuse it so easily in that artifact cube, was because I didn't even have to work hard, because all I had to do was have some 3 mana artifacts in the deck, right? And the deck that I drafted naturally was going to play those cards. And that's even another reason to think, well, maybe it's a little bit more broken, because again, it's just one of those things. All I'm doing is kind of just playing Magic. All I did was play this 3-mana Enters the Battlefield Scries 2, and then every time I cast a 3-mana artifact, I'm just getting this absurd amount of value every time. So maybe it can be abusable, maybe not. I think it's good to test.
So I actually do agree with our initial observation with Anthony, is that propaganda is kind of in this environment, and it's in a weird card because on paper it can let blue decks really stave off those aggro decks and helps control decks kind of regulate and stay in the game until they kind of eventually reach their win cons. But I think that when you're talking about not wanting dirtily commander-esque board states, propaganda kind of goes the complete opposite of what your goal is. And that's one of the big reasons that I wanted to mention it, because it was kind of out of place for what your environment's trying to do. And I will also add, if that you're still not convinced, that being able to let your aggro deck and your tokens deck actually put pressure on a lot of these greedier decks will help stave off 5-color decks.
I want to lean on the comment that you made about Commander. When I first saw these kind of effects, right, Propaganda, Ghostly Prison, anything that taxes a player for being aggressive, to me, that's punishing anyone that wants to play aggressively for the sake of trying to give a little bit of game to one color, right? Or someone who's playing, or even multiple people that are playing that single color, right? And I feel that the whole counter magic thing is almost a bit disingenuous, because I don't want to just say, here's something that I originally gave to a blue player to allow them to survive in the face of an aggressive deck. I don't want to just say, okay, I'm going to take that out. Good luck. Here's a single piece of counter magic. I would rather a card, even something that has a little bit of a repeatable value. You've already got Third Path Iconoclast in there, but I think cards like that are very, very good. They reward you for playing a blue Is-It kind of theme, and then being able to, put some value on the battlefield and stave off those aggressive decks. They just create, and again, this is going back to the Commander, because I played a ton of these kind of effects in an old Commander deck of mine, is that it just created unfun. It just wasn't like, hey, you're going to attack me? Okay, pay 4 mana. Okay, and it almost just made people it almost made people want to target me more, because they just disliked the effect. It was just not a fun effect.
Well, real quick, May, I'm going to put Blind Obedience and those type of effects in there too, because I see that show up in a lot of lists, and I swear I saw it in your list at one point, but I don't think it's there. But these type of cards, even though you have Extort, anything that it's trying to emulate like a Thalia type effect.
What's the enchantment that means you can only play? There's something that only plays one. You can only play one spell a turn. I don't recall the name of it right now, right? But there's an enchantment you play. I think it's one in a white. Yeah, I think it is Deafening Silence, right? So you can only play one spell a turn. I played that in a Commander game. I played it turn 2, and one of the other players at the table was like, "Well, that's my whole deck hose," and he just scooped right then. That was it. That was the end. I think that was, you were in that game.
I like these.
And we played a one-on-one.
I like these Live the Dream type of cards. I do. I think they're fun. I think they're memorable, and I think they have splash. But May has a thought on this idea.
What I was going to say was that when it comes to propaganda, what you're trying to do with it in this environment, you can also fill with cards like Chrome Host Seed Shark, which you already have in this environment, where you're creating tokens that you can pay mana into in order to just instantly create a blocker, right? Like cards like those that can create blockers to stave off a lot of those attackers, and you have other options to kind of play defensively of, all right, I'm just going to keep making tokens or making value every turn to stave off your attackers. You don't need propaganda in this environment to do the thing that they're already doing.
I don't really want to laugh. I took propaganda out of a Commander deck I sold, so I'm clearly eating my own hat on this one.
Yeah. I get it. I get why you're doing it. We actually had this conversation with Emma Partlow, where she actually runs it in her Peasant Cube, and we're kind of this polarized idea too, is I understand in those lower tier environments, those lower speed environments, you want to give control an opportunity, and these cards do actually allow that. But they also stave off aggro. Somebody actually asked me once, if you want to punish a certain archetype so much for existing, then why does it exist at all? And I think it's a fair way to think about it. And these cards are fantastic, like in a Commander environment where you want to buy yourself some time because you're doing 9 to 15 turns. But we're on a 50-minute timer, is that correct? 50-minute timer? And then we go to turns, right? And these kind of create that turn situation that we're kind of trying to avoid. We want that's the thing that's hard to think about sometimes. This cube is fun, and we want complexity, but then the board gets so rich, so complex. We lose all the things that we're trying to do in order to actually end the game. And then when you look at Ghostly Prison and Propaganda and Blind Obedience, I see that card show up in a lot of lists. It's the exact opposite of what you want to do, where games, you're shutting down all of your Goblin Guide type effects, right?
And I think,
your Ragavans.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to a conversation that I've had with you, and we've talked about it within our group. Specifically, if we've talked about Commander, right? It's one of the reasons why I don't play. I think I might have one Commander deck, and I have like 10 or 11, which I don't really play anymore. But I think I have one deck that does not have an infinite combo to win the game. I always try and include at least one. There's nothing more painful to me than sitting down to play a game, any game of Magic, I don't care what format it is, and we're sitting there for an hour just either playing a land and passing the turn because everything is stalled, or there's effects on the board that are just preventing any kind of progress for the players, right? And sometimes that can just be, it doesn't even have to be a or a symmetrical or non-symmetrical effect, right? It can be anything, it can just be something that's preventing the game from coming to a conclusion. And we've got players, I'm not going to name names, and it doesn't really matter because I don't hate on them for creating the kind of decks that they do, but you know, I'm not here to get paid for us playing this game, or for you trying to win. You're not going to win $20 million if you beat me at this game, right? So staxing the crap out of me for 2.5 hours and not letting me play Magic is not my idea of fun.
Unless somebody wants to pay me $20 million. Let's go, Scott. Let's go.
I'll play against any stacks deck.
I will propaganda all day.
But we're not.
Which kind of leads me, it kind of just chains off in this next one. The reason why I actually flagged the Sword of Forge and Frontier for 3 colorless, and you get an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from red and green. And I know why you're doing that, because that is your hate colors. At least I'm assuming.
That's part of it. That's part of it. It's the hate colors, but it's also the power outlier of the modified deck, right? The red, green creatures. I have seen enough 11/11s on the board to know that it's mainly about the card advantage, right? And being able to get a land into play. But I think that's valid feedback. And the funny thing is, it's really poorly performing in the environment.
I was going to say, because this seems like if you're putting it there because you want it to be a protective piece, and yet the card itself is designed to get the most value when you're attacking with it, that kind of seems like it would almost be at odds with why it would be in the cube. Yeah,
I think it's not in there as a protection piece. Okay. It's actually mainly for the card advantage element.
Okay.
Like when the Dimir one, I can't remember which one it is, right? But it's like the one that gives you surveil and flashback. That was really enticing to me too. But ultimately, like, swords are actually just like unplayable in this. And I don't. If you're listening to this, you didn't hear this, but swords are pretty unplayable in the Curio Cube. Like, you're just
swords are unplayable. Period. Let's just put it out there. The swords are all unplayable.
I've cut down to the one that lets me draw cards. That's
so. All right, I'll give you Fire and Ice. I'll give you Fire and Ice.
Yeah.
But it's gotten weird. It's interesting how we've all. The dynamic of Magic players and cube curators in particular, how we've actually grown or evolved, where we want interaction, where before we were pressing, like, Magic is really making like this whole idea of not interaction. It's making the propagandas. It's making the blind obedience. It's making Folius, stacks and taxes kind of thing, right? Which is fun for me, but not fun for you. But when we're building a cube, we want to think about, like, what's May's experience that she's facing off against me, right? Because it'll invalidate her entire deck if she's in Gruul with Sword of Forge and Frontier. Her experience, her feedback on your cube, whether we like it, love it, or leave it, that's the problem that you and I face when you're doing quadrants, I'm doing binary, but that's what you and I experience as curators, is our feedback is very contextualized to the idea, did May have fun? And if she's sitting across the table with me and I get this card on and she's in your Gruul deck, even though it's your most powerful deck, she was ready to smash me, but now she can't because I just keep throwing up.
Yeah.
I had a person actually reach out to me recently and said, in my Fem cube, why aren't you running Mom? And then I sent that to May, and she got a little chuckle. Didn't you, May?
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's a weird chuckle because Mom's like representative of the entire idea of the cube, right? But the minute Mom comes online, you are not playing Magic against anymore. I'm playing against you. I'm playing Solitaire. And that's where protection interaction actually comes online. It becomes problematic. And I want to make this a little bit more expansive for people listening outside the Curio Cube. But that's why we make these choices, is so that you can do a Doomblade and not worry about a Mom, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. No, I think that's a valid one to call out. And it's also, because it's so mid in playing terms, I think it's very likely to not make it to CubeCon. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, so I have the perfect card for you. It's perfect. It's
okay.
Perfection. You ready? Pisa de la Resistance. It is Quadrant's Command. It like literally gets 50% of your cube.
Was that Freudian?
Yeah.
Was that Freudian?
It's Freudian.
Not Quadrix Command. Quadrant's
I did. Quadrant's.
I love that. Well done, Anthony.
So we're going to do, for one colorless and Simic in an instant, choose 2. Return target creature or planeswalker. I don't know. Do you have those?
Got no shortage of them.
Okay. Counter target artifact or enchantment. Does that cover you?
Quite a bit, yeah.
Okay. What about put 2/1/1 counters? Do you have modular or anything like that cares?
A small amount, just like the whole.
Okay. What about the part that says target player shuffles up to 3 cards from their graveyard in the library? Do you have anything that like would care about that idea? This is
it definitely would hurt some individuals.
This is chef's kiss. I think this is like designed for you, not for me. I run it. I only get 50% of this card. You get 100%. This is the best card, but not broken.
It's funny because it was in the first iteration of the cube back when it had boggles in Simic, because I was like, oh, this is perfect. I'll juice up a boggle. I'll counter your artifact or enchantment. I think the fact that it hates on the sort of like core parts is the only thing that makes me question it. But at the same time, the other 3 modes are really good and enticing.
We're going to reach out to Stephen Conenfall and feel how much hate he gets out of this. Right? He's our resident Simic expert.
I was going to say, like, this almost does seem a little bit surprising. As stupid as this might sound, it's almost a little bit too good.
I don't know. I think
it's almost a little bit too good that you get so much value and synergy with all. Yeah, it is, and maybe that's a little bit too good for 3 mana, and you get to choose 2.
May. We're going to go to May. May has no dog in the race. What do you think?
No thoughts. Head empty.
Well, I love it. I think the thing that, if it was a different color pair, it would be perfect because there is no blue support for modified creatures, right? So I don't want to miscommunicate to a drafter with a multicolor signpost either. Again, that is not the function of the cube any longer, but if someone's sitting down and they see something that says, oh, cool, I get to counter the 2 things that are core pillars of the cube, but also I can modify my creatures, and I know modified is going to be in green, but then they are a Simic modified deck that can't modify. I worry that could be the other side of it, where it miscommunicates, but it is like a really elegant, like good counter spell, right? Where like Annul was like way too strong. This is at 3 mana appropriately costed, right?
Yeah, and I think that really does kind of show the level of detail that even just that 1 pip with this one choice of this 4-mode spell that you don't want to put in because you don't want to give a bad signpost. And that's something that we have talked about from time to time on the cube, right? Is we've got people in our play group that have a lot of cubes, and one thing that we've always talked about is, where do all the cards fit in? Are there signposts within your cube where I'm going to see a card? It could be a pack 1, first pack, I've got all 15 cards in my hand, and I see something and I think, wow, that is a really cool card. I really am glad to pick up a card like that, because I'm going to assume that full support is there for everything that exists within that card, right? Not then to find out at the end of the draft when I've got all 45 cards and I'm like, hey, I tried to make this work and I didn't get the cards for the person. Oh yeah, no, I don't have those in there. Those are not. And I'm like, man, that sucks, because if they were in there, not only would this have been really fun, but maybe even an archetype that's like, man, if I get this card, maybe other people won't be looking to get that card, and I'll kind of be able to get my pick of the litter, so to speak. So I applaud that, I will say. I really do think that kind of level of detail in the curation is something to be applauded, because I do find frustration in that regard as a player. I do like to be able to get a lot of information. You know, again, you get those first 15 cards, you pick them up. Every single card in there should tell you a little bit of the story. And then every time you're past the pack, you're getting a little bit more of the story of the cube. You know, what's the curator trying to do? What's the power level? What kind of archetypes are available? And any kind of little bit of misinformation can really throw someone off. So I think that's phenomenal.
So we do a Murray Povich kind of thing every time. And I actually ran your cube through spell tables, like
combo breaker,
and it was interesting. You have no combos, no infinite combos. There's nothing that came up.
Nope.
But there was
nope, not one.
There were some completion sets. There's 175 potentials. Required one card. I found that so interesting.
Yeah, I love that it's 175 doors that I plan to keep closed. Sorry, everybody, it's not gonna happen. Not in this environment.
So 471 cards didn't hit a combo. That's pretty great. That's hard to do.
Let's before we end the show, right? Let's talk about that. 471 cards, and if there's one thing that I love, it's not these 360 or 540 or 180 or any card. It's these cool, like,
it makes my face hurt. It makes my face hurt, Scott.
Yeah, it's these cool, like, non-rounded, completely crazy numbers of cards in the cube. I love
no
it.
integrals of 5. It hurts so bad.
Like, and the one thing, there's less blue cards than any other color. So if you're going to cut any cards and bring that number down or pull the number up, it's going to be blue cards.
And it's I think that's actually, it's so funny, Stu, because every time I look on Cube Cobra, I'm just like, by the way, shout out to Gwen. Every time I'm on Cube Cobra, I'm just like, how the hell did this happen? This is an artifact, an enchantment cube. Blue is like built for this. And I never feel that satisfied with the blue cards that could slot in, or they're just too generic or whatever. But I struggle with it.
I actually do have one more curveball, if that's okay.
I would love it.
What's your opinion on Heirloom Blade? For context, Heirloom Blade is a 3-mana equipment, and what it says is that whenever an equipped creature dies, you may reveal the cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card that shares a creature type with it. Put that card in front of your hand and into your hand, and the rest at the bottom of your library in any random order. It only equips for 1, and it gives +3/+1.
Pretty spicy.
So not only is it powerful, but it also replaces the thing if it dies. It can feed into a Phyrexian deck, but more importantly, it can feed your Johnny players by being like, hey, if you have 2 things that you want to search for, this is your way to do it.
And or they just flip over all their cards and give away all their knowledge, which I've seen happen. It's fantastic.
No, you've never seen that happen.
Oh my goodness.
Did that happen by any chance against me? It was against me and Christian, I believe.
What's the deck do? Oh, well, Stu's going to show us. Here we go.
Yeah, that was, and it was Bill's last card or last but one card. He's like, yeah, that's it. Can't win anymore. I'm done.
Oh no. That is a perfect suggestion. I'll be paid. I wish so here's the thing that you've probably picked up from the cube. I have a bit of a foil bug. I love foils.
I know this guy.
It is my mental illness.
Yeah, right here.
And the only one is the cat extended art secret lair. May you kind of touched on the specific like art curation, because my main cube is like everything is a classic border frame or extend like a borderless plane. If it's a planeswalker, it's borderless if it comes in it. That's like my design rule. And if it can be old border foil, it will be old border foil. So thank you for Modern Horizons 3. But Curio Cube, I wanted. What's that?
Expensive. I know, because I just did it.
Occupational hazard.
Occupational hazard.
But Curio Cube, I was like, listen, I need to have only the freaky arts. As weird as it gets, as blinged out, because I have 1 cube for restraint and I have 1 cube for like splashing out, and that's what I was going for. So, okay,
is there
we got an addition?
Why no Cloudstone Curio? Mom.
I know, Mom. I know where one's at because I sold
see
it.
Clydestone Curio.
No. Pretty haterade for, but it does punish you for not playing Artifact.
It does.
Notes are taken.
All right.
Notes are taken.
That's my
right,
recommendation.
So as we're going to have you on again, right? So this is just kind of loosey-goosey, just get out there. But we got a lot of sets coming out, right? And we're going to do a primer episode. We're going to get people ready for war. Everybody's going to do their war faces before we go on. But right now, it's kind of introductory. Agreed? Like, what is the Curio Cube all about? What are you doing? But when people go to CubeCon, they're putting on their war faces. So what is the final thoughts as far as, like, what should people expect right now?
I think you can expect all the Modern Horizons 3 haymakers to get added that are appropriate. You're not going to see any free spells, none of that. I think you can expect not a lot of changes to the Curio Cube beyond that. I don't think Bloomburrow is going to have a lot for me. I know Assassin's Creed is not going to have anything for me in this life, full stop. Yeah, I think those are the main things to look forward to this year for the Curio Cube at least. And then, in addition to that, I don't know if this is a good time for me to shill my own spiel.
Go for it.
Shill away.
Shill all
away.
the shills.
Thank you. So I've mentioned my weekly Cube event here in Brooklyn, New York called Upkeep. We are taking Upkeep to a little bit higher of a level. We're running a 64-player for charity draft. You can find it on our Twitter account at Upkeep New York, our website, www.upkeepnewyork.com. We're really passionate about donating these proceeds to Palestinian survivors and to Gaza and trying to do a bit of care in the community. It's called Cube for a Cause, 64 players, 3 rounds of Swiss, 2 days, August 24th. We will be donating all profits to the charity, and we will be doing this twice a year as long as I have, the power to do so. Next one will be in February. The charity or cause will change each time. So keep up with us and hope to see you there.
Well, good luck. And I will say, I'm a little jealous of the people that we speak to in some of these big cities. And we live in not a small city, right? We're just outside of Raleigh.
Yeah.
But man, these New York guys and the California guys that are able to just like, hey, I want to get 64 people together for a cube. And then, 13 minutes later, it's like, hey, we've got 250 people. You got some more tables?
We're in the struggle here. Because I'm all about the Cube community actually helping out with charities, right? And Scott, your charity is amazing. It's all about helping the people, right? That's what we want to do. Bless up. This is amazing. Stealing from J-Bro, but amazing. That's the thing to do.
And what a cube. Absolutely phenomenal. I'm very, very excited to play this cube.
Curio Cube.
It's
scary.
just insane.
That's a scary name, man. You took it on, right? Like I just straight up Uber Bared, and you're like, well, no, this is the Curio Cube. That's what you do. That's what you do, right? Like, right? Like it's the Great Pyramid. That's what you do. You did this yourself. No, it's too late. It's too late. We knew it. May knew what to do. I knew what to do, but you're like, no.
I am the definitive.
You are, in fact, the cube. It's like in the Met.
No, but seriously, this is a wonderful cube, and this has been a lot of fun. Man, we're so fortunate to have just such wonderful guests on our show, man. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us today, man. And the way that you've talked about the cube, obviously you're very passionate about it, but you just got such a bead on it. I'm jealous because Anthony and May know that I've been talking about a cube that I've been stringing along for about 5 years now.
Someday.
And it's a 180 cube, and I'm probably about 60% done. So the fact that you've got, they really are inspirations. All the people that I have in my group and people like yourself that have got this nailed down. I promise you, in about 5 years, I'll have my 180 cube down. It's going to happen
in a theater near you.
All right. I'm going to move over to the ending. So first of all, to Scott Mirts. First, let's ask you this, Scott. Where can we find you on the socials? Tell everybody where we can reach you.
Y'all can find me on Twitter, Scott Mirts, or Upkeep New York. Yeah, it's SCOTTMIRTS.
Okay.
And I'll be floating around varying Discords and probably unresponsive because I'm bad at Discord.
Well, to all of our New York listeners or the surrounding area, if you're interested, go check it out. Show some support for Scott and his amazing cause. And maybe you'll just get to play this beauty of a Curio Cube. All right, first of all, the numbers are just swelling out of control. So I'm just going to say thank you to all of our Patreons for all of your ongoing support. Helps keeps the light on, and it's amazing that we have just got so many great supporters out there. Thank you so much to all of you for the ongoing support. If you want to get in on the Cube discussion, you can join the MTG Facebook drafting page at facebook.com/groups/MTGCube, where our resident Anthony Adams is an admin. But not that matters, because the Cube conversation just keeps on trucking over there. A lot of people very happy and interested in Cube, and if you're looking for some help or some comments about your Cube, then go check it out. As always, if you would like to give us a 5-star review on your chosen podcast platform, really helps get the show out there to anyone that might be interested in the Cube format. You can also use our ultasleeves.com/UberCube affiliate link for 5% off your purchase, or our inkedgaming.com/UberCube affiliate link. Go check them out. Playmats, dice bags, mouse pads, all kinds of custom products available. As always, you can find us at Twitter. We are at UberCubeMTGPod, or you can reach us via email. We are UberCubeMTGPodcast@gmail.com. If you've got a longer comment, if you want to hate or love on the show, we love to hear from you either way. And again, to our Patreons at patreon.com/UberCube. Huge thank you to all of you for the ongoing support. It really means a lot. And one day I'll get that mic stand.
And then other than that, we're going to say the thing that we always say here at UberCube,
which is
Happy
Cubing!